My mother and sister told a TV host that our family bakery's secret recipe was a tribute to my late grandmother. The problem is, I invented that recipe last year, and my grandmother is alive. Well, and hates baking. They thought they had erased me from my own story, turning my life's work into a charming, marketable lie. They were celebrating a massive expansion deal, a triumph built on my sweat and my silence. What they didn't know was that while they were smiling for the cameras, I was on the phone with a forensic accountant and an intellectual property lawyer. They thought I was just the quiet baker in the back, covered in flour. They were about to find out I was also the one who kept all the receipts. And I mean all of them. The Gilded Spoon wasn't just a bakery. It was supposed to be my life. From the outside, it was a dream. A little corner shop in a gentrifying neighborhood with a mint green door and gold lettering that caught the morning sun just right. Tourists would line up for our signature creation, the lavender honey cloud cake, a ridiculously delicate chiffon cake that took me 6 months to perfect. The local food blogs called it ethereal and a revelation. Inside, the story we sold was just as sweet. We were a family affair. My mother, Carol, was the matriarch, the sharp business mind who managed the books and charmed the suppliers. My older sister, Zoe, was the face of the brand. Our beautiful, charismatic brand ambassador, whose Instagram feed was a curated masterpiece of latte art, sun-drenched pastries, and selfies with our adoring customers. And me? I was Maya. I was the baker, the one who arrived at 3 a.m., when the city was still dark and quiet, the one whose hands were perpetually dusted with flour, whose arms bore the faint, latticed scars of 1,000 hot baking sheets. I was the engine in the back, the one who made the magic happen. I didn't mind, or at least, I told myself I didn't. I loved the work. I loved the alchemy of it all, the transformation of simple ingredients into something that could make a person's day. I thought we were building something together, a legacy. My inheritance from my grandfather had provided the seed money to get the doors open, a fact that was conveniently omitted from our origin story. In our public narrative, it was Mom's business savvy and Zoe's marketing genius that launched us. I was just a part of the team, a vital yet strangely invisible part. The unfairness didn't start with a bang. It was a slow drip, 1,000 tiny cuts that I learned to ignore. It was the food critic who came in and spent 20 minutes talking to Zoe, who then repeated the flavor notes I'd carefully explained to her that morning, passing them off as her own insights. When the glowing review came out, it was Zoe's name, not mine, that was mentioned. Zoe's brilliant flavor pairings are a testament to her innate talent, it read. I remember Mom patting my shoulder, saying, "A rising tide lifts all boats, honey. This is good for all of us." I was the tide, but I wasn't in any of the boats. It was the magazine feature on female entrepreneurs with a stunning photo of Mom and Zoe, arms linked, in front of my ovens. The article described them as a power duo, revolutionizing the local pastry scene. I was mentioned once, in passing, as their talented in-house baker. I was in the building when they took the photo, in the back, developing a new vegan brioche recipe that Zoe had promised a client without consulting me. She needed it in 2 days. I pulled it off, of course. I always did. The quiet resentment simmered beneath the surface, a low heat I couldn't turn off. I'd bring up new ideas in our weekly meetings, a line of savory galettes, a partnership with a local coffee roaster, only for Mom to dismiss them. Let's not overcomplicate things, Maya. The model is working. Then, 2 weeks later, Zoe would present the exact same idea as her own brilliant marketing initiative. "Mom, I had a thought," she'd begin. And suddenly, the idea was genius. Suddenly, we had the budget for it. The most painful part was the money. I had naively agreed to a small fixed salary with the promise of profit sharing once the business is stable. According to Mom, we were never quite stable enough. Yet, I saw the new designer bags Zoe carried. I saw the weekend trips Mom took. When I'd gently asked to see the full financial records, Mom would wave her hand dismissively. "Oh, honey, it's all just numbers and spreadsheets. It would bore you to tears. You just focus on creating your beautiful cakes. Leave the ugly stuff to me." I was working 80-hour weeks, my body aching, my social life non-existent. They were working on their brand. I was building a business. They were building a narrative. And I was letting them. Because they were my family. And I desperately wanted to believe that a rising tide really did lift all boats, even the ones hidden deep underwater. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday night. It was my first evening off in 3 weeks, and I was collapsed on my couch, mindlessly scrolling through my phone. I should have been sleeping, but my body was so wired on adrenaline and sugar that I couldn't switch off. A text from my friend Chloe lit up the screen. It just said, "OMG, have you seen this?" with a link. I clicked it. It was a segment from Good Morning Metro, the city's most popular morning news show. The chyron read, "The Gilded Spoon, a sweet family success." And there they were, my mother and my sister, sitting on a cheerful yellow couch across from the host. Zoe looked radiant in a silk blouse that probably cost more than my weekly salary. Mom was poised and polished, smiling that practiced warm smile that could disarm anyone. They were talking about the bakery. Our bakery. They were talking about the lavender honey cloud cake. My cake. "So tell me the story behind this incredible cake," the host gushed, taking a delicate bite. "It's like nothing I've ever tasted." Zoe took the lead, her voice smooth as buttercream. "Well, it's actually a family recipe. It's a tribute to our grandmother, our mom's mom. She was an incredible woman, and she used to make a version of this for us when we were little girls. Lavender was her favorite." I felt the air leave my lungs. My grandmother, Carol's mother, was alive. She lived in a retirement community in Florida, and her signature dish was a microwaved lean cuisine. She thought baking was a messy bother. The lie was so audacious, so complete, it was almost impressive. But it got worse. "And we are so thrilled to announce," my mother chimed in, placing a hand on Zoe's knee, "that we've just signed a partnership with the Elysian Hotel Group. The lavender honey cloud cake will be the featured dessert in all their 5-star properties nationwide. And we're beginning the process of franchising the Gilded Spoon, bringing our family's love of baking to the whole country." My world tilted on its axis. A national hotel deal. Franchising. This was the dream. This was the endgame I had been working towards, losing sleep over, sacrificing my life for. And they were announcing it on television, without me. They had built an entire mythology around my work, written me out of my own life, and were now scaling that lie into an empire. In the corner of the screen, they showed the new branding for the hotel partnership. A beautiful watercolored logo of a lavender sprig and a honeybee. Underneath it, the words, Zoe and Carol's Gilded Spoon. Not even a mention. I wasn't a boat. I wasn't even the tide. I was the water they were walking on. And I just sat there, in my tiny apartment, covered in a fine dusting of yesterday's flour, completely and utterly invisible. The shock was a physical thing. A cold wave that started in my stomach and spread through my limbs, leaving me numb. Then the numbness gave way to a white-hot rage so pure and so potent, it felt like it could power a city. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone against the wall, though every fiber of my being wanted to. Instead, a strange, terrifying calm washed over me. The kind of calm that comes after the storm has passed, and you can finally see the full extent of the devastation. They thought I was a pushover. They thought I was the quiet, artistic type who didn't understand the ugly stuff. They had grossly, catastrophically underestimated me. My first call wasn't to them. It was to Chloe, the friend who had sent me the link. She was a paralegal at a downtown firm. "Chloe," I said, my voice steady, "who is the most ruthless, bloodthirsty intellectual property lawyer you know?" An hour later, I had a name. Marcus Thorne. His website described him as a specialist in creative and brand asset protection. His reviews described him as a shark. I sent him an email with the subject line, "Urgent, intellectual property theft, and fraudulent partnership." I attached the link to the TV segment. He replied in 7 minutes. "My office, tomorrow, 9 a.m. My next move was digital. I was the one who had set up our entire cloud-based system. The shared drives, the inventory software, the financial portals. Mom could handle the front-end interface of QuickBooks, but I had the administrator passwords. I had the keys to the entire kingdom. For the next 4 hours, I didn't stop. I went through everything. I found the folder for the Elysian Hotel deal. It was password protected, but they'd used my birthday as the password. The arrogance was breathtaking. Inside was a treasure trove of deceit. The executed contract, naming Carol and Zoe as sole proprietors of the newly formed GCS Hospitality LLC. The trademark application for the Lavender Honey Cloud Cake, filed 3 months ago, with their names listed as the creators. Emails between them and the hotel's legal team, explicitly discussing the marketing narrative of the grandmother's recipe. There was even a mood board for the franchise prospectus, filled with images of rustic farmhouses and smiling, silver-haired women who were supposed to represent our dead grandmother. But the worst discovery was in the financials. I burrowed deep into the accounting software, past the surface-level reports Mom would show me, and into the raw transaction data. I found a separate, hidden account. A slush fund. For months, they had been systematically siphoning off a percentage of our profits, my profits, into this account. Tens of thousands of dollars. It paid for Zoe's new car. It paid for Mom's business trips to luxury spas. It paid for the high-powered PR firm that got them the TV spot. It was all there, in black and white. Every lie, every theft. I downloaded everything. I created encrypted time-stamped files. I made backups of the backups. I gathered my original dated recipe notebooks, The ones with my frantic scribbles and stained pages showing the evolution of the cloud cake from a failed experiment to a masterpiece. I found text messages where I'd excitedly told Zoe, "I think I finally figured out the meringue ratio." I screenshot every single thing. By the time the sun started to rise, I had a digital fortress of evidence, a meticulous, undeniable record of their betrayal. They had built an empire on a story. I was about to dismantle it with the truth. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern, a well-worn groove in the vinyl of our family's history. As I sat there amidst my mountain of evidence, memories I had long suppressed began to surface with sickening clarity. I was 12, in my middle school science fair. My project was on the crystallization of sugar, a nerdy precursor to my baking obsession. I had spent weeks on it, meticulously growing rock candy on strings, documenting the process with photos and detailed notes. I was painfully shy, terrified of public speaking. Zoe, a confident and popular ninth grader, didn't have a project. The night before the fair, Mom sat me down. "Maya, honey," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "You've done such a wonderful job with this project, but you know how nervous you get. Zoe is so good with people. Why don't you let her present it? It will still be your win." I didn't want to. I tried to protest, but I was worn down by a flurry of phrases like team player and what's best for the family. The next day, I stood in the back of the gymnasium and watched my sister, poised and articulate, explain my research to the judges. She gestured to my carefully arranged jars and my handwritten display board. She won the first-place ribbon. When they called her name, she beamed and accepted the award, never once looking in my direction. At home, Mom hung the ribbon in the living room. "See," she said, smiling at me. "Aren't you proud of your sister?" I wasn't. I felt hollowed out. But I learned my lesson. My work was valuable, but I wasn't. My contribution was only useful if it could be channeled through someone more presentable, more charismatic. Then there was the bakery itself. The down payment didn't come from Mom's savings, as the articles claimed. It came from a small inheritance left to me by my other grandmother, my dad's mom, Grandma Rose. She was the one who had actually encouraged my baking. She'd bought me my first stand mixer and would sit for hours in the kitchen just watching me work, telling me I had magic hands. When she passed away, she left me $50,000 with a note that said, "For your sweet dream, whatever it may be." I told Mom and Zoe my idea for the bakery, and they sprang into action. It was my money, my dream, but it instantly became our project. I signed the check over to an account Mom set up for the business. I was so grateful for their help, so swept up in the excitement that I didn't question it when the business license and the lease were put in all three of our names. It was a formality, Mom had said. We're all partners, after all. I was a partner who provided 100% of the startup capital and 100% of the product, while taking the smallest salary and having zero financial transparency. I wasn't a partner. I was the first and most crucial investor, and I had been systematically diluted out of my own company before the doors even opened. Each memory was another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Every time I'd smooth things over, every time I'd let a slight go unanswered, I wasn't keeping the peace. I was enabling the next, bigger transgression. I was teaching them that I would absorb any injustice for the sake of a family that had long since seen me not as a daughter or a sister, but as a resource. A quiet, reliable, endlessly exploitable resource. That night, I finally understood. They didn't just steal a recipe. They had been stealing from me my whole life. The meeting with Marcus Thorne was like stepping into a different reality. His office was on the 40th floor, all glass and steel, overlooking the city. He wasn't a shark. He was an apex predator. He wore a perfectly tailored suit and had an air of intense, unnerving stillness. He listened to my story without interruption, his eyes fixed on me, occasionally nodding. I laid it all out. The science fair, the inheritance, the slow erasure at the bakery. Then I opened my laptop and walked him through the files I'd downloaded. The contracts, the hidden bank account, the trademark application, the emails. With each piece of evidence, his expression hardened, not with surprise, but with a kind of clinical recognition. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. "They aren't just bad business partners, Miss Garcia," he said, his voice calm and precise. "This is a textbook case of corporate malfeasance, intellectual property theft, and likely criminal fraud. You have been meticulously and deliberately defrauded by your own family." Hearing it stated so boldly, by a stranger, was both horrifying and validating. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. "So what do we do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "We send a message," he replied, a glint in his eye. "Not a text, not an email. We send a cease and desist letter so terrifying it will make their teeth ache. We send it to them, to the CEO of the Elysian Hotel Group, and to the producer of Good Morning Metro. We allege trademark infringement, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraudulent misrepresentation. We demand an immediate freeze on the partnership, a full retraction of the television segment, and a complete forensic accounting of the business. And we give them 48 hours to comply." He laid out the strategy, like a general planning an invasion. It was swift, brutal, and left no room for negotiation. He was right. This wasn't a family squabble to be worked out over dinner. This was a legal battle, and I had just brought in heavy artillery. The letters went out that afternoon via courier. I went home and turned off my phone. I knew the storm was coming, and I needed to be in the eye of it, still and silent. The first call came at 6:17 p.m. Zoe. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was pure fury. "Maya, what the hell is this? Some lawyer sent a letter? You're trying to ruin everything. Call me back now." Next was Mom, at 6:22 p.m. Her voicemail was different. It was the wounded, manipulative tone I knew so well. "Maya, honey, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I don't know who this man is, but he's making wild accusations. We're a family. We don't do things like this. You're scaring us. Please just call me so we can fix this." They still thought they could fix this. They still thought I was the same person I was 24 hours ago. They had no idea who they were dealing with anymore. The real bombshell landed the next morning. An email from the Elysian Hotel's general counsel, ceasing Marcos. They were putting the partnership on indefinite hold, pending an internal investigation. A few hours later, A frantic call from the producer of the morning show, which I let Marcus handle. The online version of the segment was taken down, scrubbed from their website and YouTube channel. I had detonated a bomb in the center of their new empire, and the fallout was just beginning. They had taken my dream and twisted it into a lie. So, I took it back. The only way I knew how. I took it apart, piece by piece. They showed up at my apartment 2 days later. There was no warning, just a frantic, insistent pounding on my door that echoed the panic in their voicemails. I looked through the peephole. It was both of them, my mother and my sister, looking disheveled and furious. Zoe's face was blotchy from crying, or maybe from rage. Mom's usual mask of serene control had cracked, revealing the raw panic underneath. I took a deep breath, unlocked the deadbolt, and opened the door. I didn't invite them in. I just stood in the doorway, blocking their path, my arms crossed. "You need to call off your lawyer," Zoe spat, her voice trembling. "You are destroying everything we've worked for. The hotel deal is dead. They think we're frauds." "We are frauds," I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. "Or rather, you are." My mother pushed past Zoe, trying to use her old tactics. "Maya, this has gone far enough," she said, her voice attempting a tone of parental authority that no longer had any effect on me. "This is a family matter. You do not bring in lawyers. You have embarrassed us. You have embarrassed yourself." "I'm not the one who went on national television and lied about a dead relative to sell a cake I didn't create," I replied, meeting her gaze without flinching. For the first time, she looked away. Zoe stepped forward again. "It was just a story, a marketing angle. You're so dramatic you can't see the big picture. This was going to set us all up for life." "Set us up?" I almost laughed. "Let's talk about the big picture, Zoe. Let's talk about the GCS Hospitality LLC you two established without me. Let's talk about the trademark you filed for my recipe under your names. Or should we talk about the secret bank account, the one you've been using to pay for your cars and your vacations with the profits from my labor?" A flicker of genuine shock crossed Zoe's face. She looked at Mom. "What is she talking about?" Mom's face went pale. She hadn't told Zoe about the slush fund. Of course she hadn't. That was her secret, her leverage. "Maya, you don't understand the complexities of running a business," Mom stammered, falling back on her old script. "There are expenses. I understand fraud when I see it." I cut her off. I pulled out my phone and opened a file. It was a screenshot of the bank transfer for Zoe's car down payment, drawn directly from the hidden account. I held the phone up for Zoe to see. She stared at it, her mouth falling open. She looked from the phone to our mother, a dawning horror in her eyes. The united front was crumbling, right there on my doorstep. "You lied to me," Zoe whispered, her voice cracking. "You all lied to me," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "You stood on my shoulders and called yourselves tall. You ate the fruit from a tree I planted and pretended you grew it from a seed. You didn't just exclude me. You erased me. You thought I was a fool who would just keep baking in the dark while you stood in the spotlight." I looked at my mother, the architect of it all. "It's over," I said, the words hanging in the air between us. "The gilded spoon, the partnership, all of it. It's done. You wanted the business. You can have what's left of it, but you will never again profit from another thing I create." I stepped back and closed the door in their stunned faces. I leaned against it, my heart pounding, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small or invisible. I felt the immense, terrifying and exhilarating power of my own voice. The aftermath was a slow, messy demolition. The Gilded Spoon, once a symbol of my dream, became a ghost town. Without my baking, there was no product. The doors closed a week after the confrontation, a simple sign taped to the glass. Closed until further notice. Notice never came. The legal battle, as Marcus had predicted, was brutal. Mom and Zoe hired a lawyer who tried to argue that my contributions were work for hire, that the recipes belonged to the business they all co-owned. But my evidence was overwhelming. The dated notebooks, the text messages, the financial trail of my inheritance. It all painted a clear picture. I wasn't an employee. I was the founder they had swindled. We settled out of court. I didn't want their money. Not really. I wanted them gone. The settlement dissolved the company. I got the rights to all my recipes, the brand name, which I had no intention of ever using again, and the remaining cash in the legitimate business account after all debts were paid. It wasn't much. They had bled it dry. Mom and Zoe were left with the liabilities, the broken lease on the storefront, and the tarnished reputation. The story spread through our community like wildfire. At first, the narrative was split. Some family members, the ones who only ever saw the glossy surface, called me. My Aunt Sharon told me I was tearing the family apart over a cake. A cousin accused me of being jealous of Zoe's success. They saw a thriving family business, and I was the one who had torched it. But then the truth started to seep out. Chloe, loyal and discreet, told a few close friends the real story. Suppliers I had built relationships with, who knew I was the one there at 4 a.m., started talking. The narrative began to shift. The people who had always known the truth, but had been too polite to say anything, started to speak up. The barista at the coffee shop next door told me, "We always knew you were the real genius behind that place," says the farmer who sold me my berries sent me a text. "Heard you're on your own now. Let me know when you're ready. The first case of strawberries is on me." The most significant consequence was the schism between my mother and sister. Zoe, faced with the irrefutable proof of Mom's financial deception, felt betrayed. The power duo had imploded. I heard from a cousin that they had a screaming match that ended with Zoe moving out. Their alliance, built on a shared interest in profiting from my work, couldn't survive the harsh light of accountability. They had lost their golden goose, and now they were turning on each other. I was left in the quiet wreckage. I had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a necessary amputation. I had cut off a part of myself, my family, my creation, my past, in order to survive. I was alone, professionally adrift, and my family was in ruins. But as I sat in my quiet apartment, the air no longer thick with the scent of sugar and resentment, I felt a strange sense of peace. It was the quiet after a long and brutal war. The fighting was over. The silence was my own. In that silence, I finally had room to think. For years, my identity had been wrapped up in being the good daughter, the hard-working sister, the one who never made waves. My desire to please them, to earn their love and approval, had been a cage of my own making. I had willingly handed them the keys, hoping they would eventually choose to let me out. I realized they never would have. Why would they? I was too useful right where I was. The life lesson that bloomed in the wreckage was sharp and clear. Your talent is not a community chest for others to plunder. Your peace is not a currency to be spent keeping others comfortable, and family is not an excuse for exploitation. Love, real love, is not transactional, but respect is. And I had been commanding none. I learned that silence in the face of injustice isn't grace. It's complicity. Every time I had swallowed my anger, every time I had let a lie slide, I was co-signing their behavior. I was teaching them how to treat me. The ultimate betrayal wasn't the TV show or the secret bank account. It was the slow, steady realization that the people who were supposed to build me up had been systematically tearing me down for their own gain. And I had let them. My biggest mistake wasn't trusting them. It was not trusting myself. Not trusting that little voice inside me that knew something was wrong, that knew I deserved more. I had been so afraid of losing them that I had lost myself instead. The process of taking everything back was the process of finding myself again. It wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration, restoring my name, my work, and my worth. I had to burn down the Gilded Spoon because it was a monument to a false version of me. A monument to the quiet, compliant, endlessly giving Maya they had created. That person was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who understood that no is a complete sentence. Someone who understood that you can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. And someone who finally believed that my own dream, the one I funded with my own inheritance and built with my own 2 hands, was worth fighting for, even if it meant fighting the people I was supposed to love the most. The peace I felt wasn't the absence of conflict. It was the presence of self-respect, and it was worth more than any hotel contract or franchise deal. I didn't bake for 3 months. The very thought of flour and sugar made me feel tired. I needed to untangle myself from the work that had been used to define and diminish me. I got a simple, anonymous job at a bookstore. I stocked shelves, worked the register, and reveled in the quiet, dusty scent of paper and ink. I spoke to strangers about books, not pastries. No one knew my story. No one knew my name. I was just Maya, the woman who could recommend a good mystery novel. It was healing. Slowly, the urge to create returned. It started small. I baked a simple loaf of sourdough in my tiny apartment kitchen. The familiar feel of the dough in my hands wasn't fraught with resentment anymore. It felt like coming home to myself. I didn't bake for a customer or a deadline. I baked for me. And it was good. I started experimenting again, for the sheer joy of it. I bought a small stall at a local weekend farmer's market. I didn't have a fancy sign or a brand name. It was just me, a folding table, and a few dozen of whatever I felt like baking that week. Lemon thyme shortbread, cardamom buns, a dark chocolate cake with sea salt. People started coming back, week after week. They didn't know about the Gilded Spoon. They just knew my baking was good. They learned my name. My name. One day, a woman came to my stall. "You're Maya, right?" she asked. "A friend of mine told me I had to try your stuff. She said you used to own that beautiful place downtown, the Gilded Spoon." I braced myself, expecting pity or awkward questions. "She said you were the real talent there," the woman continued. "And man, was she right." She bought 3 of everything. I'm starting over, from scratch. There is no empire, no 5-star hotel deal. My bank account is smaller, but my life is bigger. I'm no longer invisible. And I want to leave you with this. If you feel like a ghost in your own life, if your contributions are being erased, if you are being told to be quiet for the sake of a piece that cost you everything, your story isn't over. It's waiting for a new author. You. Have you ever had to walk away from something you built to save yourself? Have you ever had to choose your peace over a relationship? Share your story in the comments below. Let's talk about it. Reading your stories reminds all of us that we aren't alone in the messy, beautiful, and necessary work of rebuilding.